Hello, my name is Barbara Field. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Sacramento, California, and I specialize in treating trauma, addiction, attachment, and grief. And I started my YouTube channel, The Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them, just so people would have a place to sort of hear their own voice. So whether you're a person who's grieving or someone who treats grief or specializes in grief, I'm hoping to create a space where everyone finds someone like them so they can see that their experience, they're not alone, they're grieving just right, and they're invited to grieve any old way they want to. And today I've invited some genuinely amazing women to hang out with us to talk about women and grief in particular. And so I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do. And let's start with Davetta. Can you say your name for me? Because I say it differently every time.
Great. It's Davetta.
Davetta. Okay. So tell us about you.
Okay. I'm Davetta Vickers, and I am the producer and co-host of Let's Talk W2W, which stands for Woman to Woman. It is a women's empowerment podcast that I started just a little over a year ago. It was a future plan that just kind of went live 3 years ahead of what I had planned, but it gives us the opportunity to encourage women to share women's stories and dig into some of just the things that we as women have experienced, whether it's in our personal lives, our careers. Sometimes it takes us back into our childhood even, and some of the a little bit less pleasant things that we've experienced. And then it gives us the opportunity to connect women with those that are ready to move into being mentored or share their journey. And so that's what I do now. In addition to that, I also have a Christian women's support group. Woman to Woman of Vision. I've had that's been kind of my baby for the past 22 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We have groups that meet in Oklahoma City, Texas, and here in California. And so we're excited about that. And it's virtual. We do virtual and we're planning some in-person things. But 22 years ago, when I started that, my slogan was, we're touching the hearts of women around the world. Today, we are able to do that virtually. I had no idea that we would be able to achieve that when that was placed in my spirit, and here we are today. So between Let's Talk Woman to Woman and Women of Vision, women are my passion, and helping to empower them is my goal.
That's great. And I'm so glad I got to meet you at an event that empowers women escaping trafficking.
Yes.
And just realized that I was very excited about you in the future. Okay, how about Jen?
Well, hi, I am Jen Oliver. I'm really happy to be here with Davetta, with Karen, with you, Barb. Thank you. I am a speaker coach. So what that means is I coach primarily women. I do work with men, but my focus and my niche and my passion is without question women. And I coach them from everything as it relates to speaking, communicating, expressing themselves in a way that feels good, that feels true to them, not performative, not stand here, do this with your hands, do this with your eyes. It's more of a how can you drop into your body, your spirit and soul, and speak with an authentic voice from that place. And then you are able to have greater impact, whether it's from a stage because you're giving a large, high stakes talk, to in a one-to-one conversation with someone you love that feels very weighty. It matters that women have their voice. And I'm passionate about it because, as you all have probably observed, the dis-ease that occurs when a woman cannot express herself, when she cannot speak, when she cannot get to her truth and express it in a way that feels true, in a way that feels right and good and good in her skin. And so that's just super important to me. And I love conversations like this. We need to continue to normalize these types of conversations. And I love that you're doing that, Barbara. I love it.
Thank you. And so I met you at Women Speak, which is one of the ways that you help women learn to get their voice back.
Yeah.
And it's just been the most wonderful experience for me. And I try to get everyone I know to go.
You do. Love
So
it.
it's great to know you. And Karen, how about if you tell us about you?
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. I'm really honored to be here with you ladies. My name is Karen Penfold, and I'm a two-time breast cancer survivor. I feel like I really ought to mention that in October. 15-year survivor, two times. I consider myself a trauma survivor and an ongoing griever, and someone who is intentionally also in an ongoing process of healing. And the work that I do, my business and ministry is called Full of Hope Yoga and Trauma Recovery. And I'm a trauma recovery practitioner. I have been working with women for 10 years now. And my passion is working primarily with women, sometimes men, first responders, but mostly women. And my passion is to work one-on-one with them in a sacred and safe space where healing can take place. Women come to me I always say they come for the same thing, and they're coming for relief, right? Relief from something. And often that something is anxiety, overwhelm, chronic pain, chronic illness. And what they discover, I don't tell them, right? Like what we discover along the healing journey is that underneath that anxiety and overwhelm and the chronics is often unprocessed trauma, unprocessed grief. So I work with women to bring relief, healing, and hope to them. Let's see, I'm started this journey as a breast cancer survivor who had traumatically lost a 5-year career as a breast cancer patient advocate. And my mother, I realized why I needed to step away from a job that I loved was because my mother was diagnosed with terminal stage lung cancer. So I got to spend 4 months with my mother, and it was sacred, precious time, healing, a lot of healing there, a lot of learning, and a lot of me now understanding, everything from the past is for this present future. But that's when I began my quest for how to help women heal from anxiety, trauma, grief. And I did certification programs in trauma-informed yoga, trauma-informed meditation, David Kessler's grief certification course, and lots of courses on somatic healing, nervous system regulation. And so that's where my passion is. I have a studio here in Sacramento, California. I see women individually and in small groups here in my studio at my home. I'm super blessed to have that. And of course, virtually over Zoom.
Well, that's great. Well, welcome all of you. It's just so neat to have all of you here. And so I asked each one of you to think about what's something in particular you would like us to talk about. So we'll start with Jen's reply. So I'm just going to read it so everybody has all the same information. So Jen said, since I work with women and their ability to express themselves and speak and use their voice, I would love to speak to the importance of giving voice to our grief and how that relates to being a woman in today's world, what we have been given permission to speak about, and what the culture and our own upbringing, origins, institutions, patriarchal influences have told us about our own grief experiences and what is appropriate to express and what isn't. So we'll just each talk a little bit about that giant, meaty topic. So Jen, how about if you get us started with that?
Yeah, it's giant. It is meaty. And it's got a lot of little tendrils and fingerlings as well, doesn't it? So for me, I think this inquiry and this work that I do, it's that classic, I think it's a Buddhist phrase that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, or that, or something to the effect of, we are called to the very work and healing we need to do ourselves. So I know for a fact that I'm called to this aspect, among others, in the work I do, helping women to show up real and find their true voice. This is part of it for me. I feel like I've never been able to express grief, that I'm supposed to put a shiny, happy face on it, that we're supposed to not burden anyone with our grief or our uncomfortable feelings. Instead, we're supposed to swoop in and fix it and have command of the situation, and that there's just simply no room for that. And that if you are to grieve, maybe you do it with a few trusted girlfriends or in therapy, but it's very contained. And my understanding in my wiring and my brain and my psyche is that many of us live in one big room as women, and to compartmentalize is not exactly the way we operate. It's one of our gifts, actually, that we can operate in one big room and not segment things and put them into their different spaces and close the door. But it's all present. And that's actually a really beautiful thing if you think about, that's life, living on life's terms. But I still find it a struggle. I found it a struggle this very morning, having some hard feelings and not wanting to be still, not wanting to sit with them, and certainly not wanting to give them voice, unless this is the spin I'll put on it. Oh, I'll give it voice because it'll be helpful to someone else, not because it's actually something I need to feel, process, and perhaps express. So I wanted to ask you all what your thoughts were around it and what you've observed, experienced, because it's complex, but it's vital. It's vital to our health and well-being.
Yes.
We can both feel our grief, then process it, and oftentimes express it in a way that feels safe. Thoughts, feelings, pushback, I love it all.
So Karen, how about you?
I agree. What I often see in with women in trauma and in grief is that we often deny ourselves as a trauma response. That's the way we get through it, right? That's the way we survive, is by white knuckling it, pushing through it, being strong, taking care of others, and in that we deny ourselves, and in the denying our needs, we become very disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from our needs. So if you don't even know what you need, you certainly can't voice it. So we become so disconnected, and in that process, I see it, and I've experienced it. We lose our choice. We lose access to choice, our voice, and with that, empowerment. And so, as a somatic practitioner, I see my role is to help women regain their connection to their embodied self and have not just experiences of the mind and of the heart and spirit. This is important, but to have an embodied experience of having choice over something, and to feel that in their body. And that's why for me, you know, yoga and somatic practices work so great, because that's how we have an embodied experience. And so when women can actually feel that they have some choice, and that choice just might be something like, you know, let's stand up and find a stable stance. Find a stance where you feel strong and stable in your body. I don't know what that feels like for you. I'm not in your body, you are. And what would it feel like, you know, to be powerful, or this phrase, this trauma recovery embodied affirmation of, I have a right to take up space in this world. I asked my women, what if you were to stand or hold your body in a gesture or a stance that embodied, where you could feel, I have a right to take up space in this world, you know? And it's interesting how like for me, that's this for me, after lots of getting to do this practice with other people and lots of my own healing. But for some women, that's so foreign that they have a right to take up space, right? It's so foreign. It's not an embodied experience. In fact, their embodied experience is, like Jen was saying, is to be small. So I agree. That's my comment, Jen, is I'm just like, yes, about voice and choice and power, and moving away with agency into that place of, I have a voice that I can express well without being harmed. And there's been a lot of that. And maybe that's where Davetta comes in. I don't know.
So Jen, you talked about like all of us being in the room. So I think like my experience of talking to all kinds of people about grief in these last few months is that would be great if we all felt like we were in the room together. And even if we are all in the room together, women still self-sort. So I don't have a right to my grief because I'm less than, I'm more than, there's a million ways that we separate ourselves. It's hard enough being women in the world. It's hard enough grieving the losses of the world without classifying ourselves. So I had a beautiful neighborhood when I was a girl, but it was one flew over the cuckoo's nest. My parents were alcoholics. My mother was a hateful, mean person who looked really forward to saying nasty things to me and my siblings. My dad was a narcissist who could not tolerate joy and chopped her head off every time something cool happened. So I could say, stop whining, at least you have food to eat. But I ate that food in a minefield where it wasn't safe to even breathe or eat. And sure, my life was beautiful, and my heart breaks for people who have to deal with poverty and hunger and abuse well beyond what I tolerated. But when we separate ourselves like that, like, I'm not entitled to my grief because it's not as bad as you, and my life isn't bad because it's not as bad as your life, I think we lose the sisterhood, where if we could all just say, you're a woman, I get part of your journey, I don't need to get all of your journey, come over here and hang out with me, and stop we don't even need enemies. We sort ourselves into enemy corners, which diminishes our capacity to help one another heal.
Yeah.
And so, Davetta.
Well, I think, Jen, you said something that really resonated with me, is the fact that sometimes we just push through and we don't allow ourselves the space. I love Karen. I love the arms lifted you know, that to me, that represented a tree and the freedom of that,
Mm.
having that space, but not even being able to allow yourself the time or the space to actually grieve.
Mhm.
And it just made me think about a personal experience I had when I was 25. I lost my father. 6 months later, to the exact day, I lost my mother,
Mm.
both unexpectedly.
Mm.
And I'm not the oldest of my siblings, but I'm usually the person that steps in and kind of pushes forward. So I did not allow myself to experience grief at all in
Mhm.
that grieving process because I had to push forward.
Right. Be
I
strong.
was, 25 years old with my own family, children, a sister in her family, and I just felt like there was no time. I had to, take a couple of seconds and keep moving because if I fell apart, all of these other people were going to fall apart too.
Mhm.
And I didn't, I have listened to so many women share their stories and deny themselves that grieving process in that season to grieve and push on until one day it just collapsed. You're driving down the street and you hear a song or, somebody says something or a fragrance and you just find yourself in just this meltdown and
Mhm.
you're wondering, where is that coming from? And what I've come to understand is that's coming from the very moment that grief happened, that you did not experience
Right.
it then. I don't think we actually are able to get through without having the experience. We may cheat ourselves and push it off and prolong it, but at some point, it actually hits us. And sometimes what I found is that, and I hear from other women, is that when it does, and we have to experience it like that, then it's like a ton of bricks.
Mhm.
And then it's very traumatic and the hurt is so deep that we can't talk about it or we don't know how to express it at that point because most people would think, well, that happened 10 years ago,
Right.
5 years ago, and here you are acting like it just happened today. When in reality, in your life, it really has just happened because you've just now allowed yourself that space to really go through that grieving process. And so when you said that really resonated with me, and I have had to just, you know, realize, even for my children, that when it comes to grief, I set the tone for the way they have grown up grieving the loss of other people.
Right.
Because they never saw me cry. They never saw me take a moment and just kind of sit down and process what's going on. It was either I've got to make plans, I've got to, we've got to get things outlined, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. That I started seeing that that's the way they were moving
Right.
through grief as well. And I thought, okay, I think that was when the light bulb came on.
Yeah.
But as women, it's so important that we can sit down and have those conversations with other women, and we have that support that says it's okay. You have a right to grieve, and if you don't do it now, it's gonna happen. Without a doubt. Or you carry that weight around so long. I can remember walking around and when my father passed. For years, I wouldn't say his name or didn't want anybody to talk about him because the tears, I just knew the tears were going to come out and it was going to be a river, a flood, you know.
Mhm.
So I didn't want anybody to even talk about it. Now I realize that that's the way I keep him alive and relevant in our lives is by talking about him. So I think that was powerful when you said that because a lot of women move through grief in that way. We
Right.
white knuckle it and keep pushing.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can I add something, Davetta? You just hit something that I realized many of us do, and that is we think sometimes it's literally sinking into and feeling something. It could be 90 seconds, it could be 90 minutes,
Mhm.
but really sitting with an emotion and allowing that energy move through us so that it doesn't stay trapped. which
Mhm.
believe me, is easier said than done for me, because I think many of us go, if I even take a minute to feel that, I can't go there.
Right,
I don't think I'll ever come back out and recover.
right.
And Davetta, you made me think of that when you said that about your father and not being able to say his name even. It's like, I can't go there. And because we all have we prioritized and we prize, I got to be productive. I've got to
Right,
put the shiny face. I've got to keep moving forward. I've got to soldier on.
right.
And so that would be, what a luxury, what an indulgence to sit and actually feel the grief and feel sad when it's
Mm,
the very medicine we need.
right. But it's the hardest thing, like you said, easier said than done,
Mhm.
right? And I've learned so much from Barbara about this and in my own work, and that is it's why I believe it's so important to have the somatic piece in someone's trauma or grief recovery of helping them sit with that pain for 90 seconds, even like, could you get, let's do 90 seconds. If you could just sit with it for 90 seconds. And the way to get there, to be able to sit with it, is to bring a person into their parasympathetic state. I call it, being present enough. We get into that parasympathetic state, find that place, as Barbara would say, find that bit of strength in your body, find that bit of calm, ease, or safety, to have that as an anchor and a resource to go back to. And then let's go find that pain. Let's go find that grief and that loss, and sit with what on your own is overwhelming, and in the past was overwhelming for you to feel it on your own. But when we're somatically present and regulated enough, then we can do that hard work of feeling it, being with it for those seconds or minutes, and then finding that bit of strength and going back to the pain. And that's when the nervous system realizes, oh, I can do this. I can feel this, and not without going into overwhelm.
That's really important. Like Davetta said, it's modeled. So we watch what our parents do, not what they say, not what they talk about, but we model what they do, and then our children model what we do. And so we don't know how to do this. What we're mostly trained is, it's like when you bring in the mail, right? You just run in, throw it on the desk, go do the things you have to do. And pretty soon you have this big pile of mail where you're like, okay, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that. But it's so huge, you can't, now it's going to take me all day, and I don't have all day for that. So the losses pile up and they pile up. And we don't know how, like Karen said, to mindfully access that so we can invite it back up and throw the junk mail away.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and that is a great segue to Karen's topic, which is just kind of an extension of what we're already talking about. So, in trauma and in grief, women often deny themselves as a survival response. This denial of self shows up as a loss of voice, choice, and power, leaving them disconnected from who they are and what they need. Much of this is not only personal, but cultural and generational. For centuries, women have been cast into the role of caretaker and nurturer, mothers, wives, friends, often expected to deny their own needs in order to serve others. And these patterns, ingrained through cultural norms, societal expectations, and even generational trauma, can be especially painful in grief, when a woman's own heart and body are crying out for compassion, support, and care. Yet in their suffering, many women continue to silence their needs, hold themselves to a culture of toxic strength, and push forward in disempowered ways.
Mhm.
So, and again, I still want to bring us back to reality. So we all have the privilege of sitting around talking about this for an hour and doing these cool, expensive sounding therapies. But a lot of people literally are trying to survive till bedtime.
Mhm.
And somehow for us to involve ourselves in the community in a way that we create space for regular old people to learn how to do the work of feeling their feelings and healing their traumas and grieving their losses. If you're like, you know, a single mom working 2 jobs, you don't have time to
Mhm.
sit down and grieve your losses or attend a workshop or
Mhm.
so just the idea, all of that is true. It is cultural, it is ingrained. And yet a lot of people don't have the privilege of even a moment to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's the tragedy is so many
Yeah.
women are disempowered because they don't really have opportunities to be anything other than what they've been for generations.
Mhm.
And so let's just talk about that more of that embedding into us. We're stamped for self-denial and taking care of everyone else. So Karen, you want to get us started with that?
Well, gosh, there's a lot there. I think it was Davetta that mentioned the word patterns, you know, and that we move in these patterns of what we've seen, and Barbara, as you said, what has been modeled. And I think just to look again at a woman and her role and what we've been stamped as culturally, through society, through different cultures and generational trauma, of this I don't know, avatar of this woman that is just strong. Like we're just expected to be strong. And I think in certain ethnic groups that is more of a cultural, this is what's expected of you. You be strong. You hold it all together. You help your sister and your mom and your grandma, and it's been referred to as toxic strength. Is this idea that that women, we're not allowed, we don't have the luxury of taking time and tending to our own heart and tending to our own needs because we need to stay strong for everyone else. And that's a great trauma response, or survival response. It works, right? Until it doesn't. And someone mentioned that too. Eventually it's all going to come crumbling down. But to answer to, well, what can be done, right, for that woman who doesn't have access to EMDR and these different groups. And for me, I think I would just say, just if that woman could hear this invitation that you get to notice what you notice and feel what you feel without judgment, comparison, or analyzing. And based on how you feel, you get to choose. And if that just in one day, if that just get to kind of just feel and get to choose, and maybe that choice is, to take a nap. Maybe that choice is to call a friend who won't tell you to be strong. Call that one person, find that one person who will let you cry on their shoulder and let you not be strong. An invitation to create and allow self-compassion for your feelings in the moment, and then that in a way that that can be done without a professional one-on-one experience, just to be invited into this soft, compassionate invitation of, I get to notice what I notice and feel what I feel. And right now I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling really sad. And based on that, and just, I'm going to make a choice for me. And that's where the choice comes in. Now I'm going to make a choice for me. So that would be my hope and prayer and invitation for a woman who is suffering grief, and that sense that she has to be strong and hold it all together.
Well, and isn't it vital to normalize this? I was just picturing this in real time as you were describing that, Karen. Think of the power if a woman sat down with her children and said, Mommy is having a really hard time and wants to cry and is feeling sad And what if we could do that and they can also then feel normalized in their discomfort and their
Right.
grief, and we can all be in the same space doing it together, or at least being offered the invitation and permission to grieve as we see it happen before our very eyes, as opposed to this notion that we have to sacrifice ourselves on the altar of everyone else, that if we grieve, then somehow are we sucking the oxygen from the
Right.
that
Right.
disables our children or our loved ones to go through their grieving process. And in fact, if anything, it's stunting them. So we've been fed a lie that, oh, we've got to hold it all together, probably because somewhere in our lineage, it made it easier on someone else. If we didn't
Right.
have that grief, it made it less, made it, we didn't make someone else uncomfortable with our grief, when in actuality, our expression of our grief in a in a healthy way, not a destructive, harmful way,
Right.
uh, it could be really important.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Davetta, what are you thinking about this?
Well, I was going to say, I'm a note taker, so I write down, I'm jotting down things all the time when you're speaking. But Karen, I heard you say something that really made me stop and think. And then I think Jen just touched on it almost. It's almost like we need someone to give us that permission. I mean, is that what it all boils down to, is put that friend. I love the friend that calls and says, it's okay for you to say you're not okay. It's okay for you to cry. But that we're almost looking for that permission before we allow ourselves to actually experience that grief, and then tending to our own heart. That, I mean, I feel like for a lot of women, if you're even outside of grief, how do we tend to our heart? Because I feel like it's the same, it's probably trickles down into other areas of our life as well. If we're not tending to our heart in doing grief, we're probably not tending to our heart doing in a lot of other situations as well. You know, and by not doing that, then we don't really know that we actually have the skill set and the ability to pause and experience grief, and that it is an experience. I mean, in some form or another, whether it's through a loved one, or, a pet, or, some of the different ways of loss that we're talking about today, we are going to experience grief and loss. And if we haven't learned or allowed ourselves, given ourselves that permission to do it and to experience that, then we see it show up the same way in other areas of our life.
Oh my gosh, can I add one thought? You guys, isn't it crazy that we have to be offered the permission, and in fact, in some cases, commanded to do it? What are we told on an airplane? Put your own oxygen mask on. Oh my God. Sorry. How many of us have been told this metaphorically and actually functionally on an airplane? Put your own mask on before you help someone else, right? We're told that constantly. We have to practically be commanded to do it, let alone be given permission, as Davetta just said.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's narrow that down to one specific area. Davetta wanted us to talk about grief around career loss. So a lot of women are diminished. They're told, my favorite example, so I'm 73. And when I was a girl, I proudly announced that I wanted an erector set because I was going to grow up and be an architect and build bridges. And my dad told me I needed to become a dietitian, work in a hospital, and marry a doctor. So forget the erector set, go play with your dolls. And that's kind of a universal message. Women have had to fight their way out of this. If we wanted you to have a life, we would issue you one in many ways, but certainly in career stuff, women have had to, the same stuff we talk about, making less money for the same job, getting a space in the good old boys club, getting the same opportunities as men. And so when we do fight our way into a career where we're really proud of ourselves and feel like we have a voice and we're making a difference, and we can hold our head up and our shoulders back, and then that goes away. So Davetta wanted us to talk about the grief of career loss. And it's a transition that's overlooked for everyone. I just did a job loss panel, and just your identity is in that job, your relationships, your car knows how to drive itself to work. So much more to losing your job, and people don't formalize it. Pretty much anytime something new happens, some old version has to have a little funeral. But Davetta said, after stepping into retirement earlier than I planned, I found myself grieving not just a role, but identity, a rhythm, and a purpose. And so that we would like to think that I'm amazing, just breathing, just sitting here breathing. I'm miraculous without lifting a finger. And yet that's not the reality of life. There's the rhythm of work, knowing where to be and what you're going to do, knowing who you're going to see, kind of what you can expect from them, and knowing what works, what helps you meet your goals. And to have that just ripped away when you found a place and you found a rhythm and you found relationships, it's like a huge death. So Davetta, would you like to get us started talking about that?
Sure. Just thinking about some of the challenges for women, depending on the career that you have to face and you have to go through to achieve that goal in that position. Whether it's, the erector set or just having the dream from a little girl that this is what I want to do with my life. This is my career path, and the energy and the preparation that it takes for us to get to that level, whether it's continued education or certifications and, taking entry-level jobs and moving up the ladder, and the obstacles that can come with that. For us as women, sometimes especially in a male-dominated work environment, and you find yourself at that level, and then unexpectedly retire, you're forced into either retirement or being coached out. I think that's now kind of like the political way to say it. We help coach people out for whatever reasons, or whether it's health reasons or related. And I know Karen even touched on, taking time out to take care of her mother, which was so important. But in most cases, it's not a planned time. And I know just from in my introductory, I said that what I do now wasn't what I was planning on doing at this point in my life. I was ready to give at least another 5 years because I love my job. And for so many women, we do love our work. We are passionate about it. And it's part of our identity. It's that space that we get sometimes outside of being a mother, being a wife, our home life. We own that. This is my space. I walk into my office. I walk into my building. I walk into, this is where I park my car. This is my space for eight, if not more hours a day. And we encounter different people. We have different forms of relationships than we do within our own home and within our family. So to be in a position to where we're moved out of that, sometimes, it can be seen as a great loss, because I've lost something that I've worked so hard for. And what I find so interesting is people want to celebrate you at the time of retirement or at that transitional time. They want to have the retirement parties. They want to, have the cake and everybody come and, everybody talk about, how important you've been over the years and how, what they've gained from you through the company. But it's not always that pleasant of experience for the recipient, because they're looking at a huge loss and gap in their routine. In what
Mhm.
am I going to do? And especially if you haven't prepared for it, if you haven't had that time to prepare for it, or it hasn't been part of your career plan, or like I said, maybe it's veered off from the path that you've had. So you find yourself there sooner than you expected. And just the depth of that shift in your life, just from my own experience over the past 18 months. When I came off of working, I worked for a healthcare system here in Sacramento for 16 years, loved what I did, loved it. I mean, I was probably the happiest person to get up and go to work to the point that during the holidays, if I had to be off more than 3 days, I was like, I'm ready to go to work.
Mhm.
But having to transition unexpectedly into retirement, it was, and I realized how it can take people into anxiety, depression, just not having that routine in place, not for some people not feeling needed in the same way. So that skill set you have, that level of communication you have with people, you lose that because now those people in your household, you don't serve them in the same way that you do on your job. And it's a fulfilling, I mean, if I can be honest, it's a fulfillment.
Mhm.
And you kind of, when you've lost that, then you have to start over looking for what's going to fill that void, but taking time to acknowledge that, okay, I can move forward. I'm not going to be in this place, I can't stay in this place forever. And the intention, I think we forget sometimes that maybe the intention is that we're never going to stay on that job forever in the first place.
Right.
But that transition can come at a time when we haven't planned it, and just the impact that has, whether it's the loss of just the recognition, the self-gratification of I've reached my goal. This is what I've dreamt of doing all my life, and here I am. Or for sometimes just being in some careers, you find maybe you're the only woman in that arena or in that position. And so that's a huge accomplishment. That's a huge accomplishment for women. And to find yourself in a different role, and to allow yourself to be in that role, and to allow yourself to grieve that, and not be pushed into the retirement party. I refused to have a retirement party, and people were like, "What's wrong with you?" you know, but it's just the mindset of being ready for it, and seeing that there's something, that's just a level. There's another space, and you move into that other space, whether that's, staying home and, gardening, or, whether it's opening, a yoga studio and helping another woman, and just finding your purpose. Because I feel like a lot of times when we make that shift, we sense it as we've lost our purpose.
Mhm.
We've lost our purpose. So, what do I do next? And you can spend days in bed, and just looking out the window thinking, what am I going to do? This is what I've known. And for most of us, retirement, we've worked 20 years, 25 years in the same, role, or roles that lead up to where we are in our career. And to not see that as time wasted or time that's just been lost, but take away from that the value of it, and how we can use it in a new area of our life. So I think that sometimes we don't stop and see it as a loss. We just immediately go into that place of, now I'm retired, or, now there's this shift in my life. And sometimes we don't realize how valuable that is, because for a lot of women, what we do outside of our home, that's our community. That's our own personal community sometimes even. I have a lady, I'll share this, a lady that works for me. She was 85 years old, worked in the same role. She would not retire. And people didn't understand why she wouldn't retire, but the patients had become her friends. They would come in to see her, even when they didn't have appointments. They had become her community. They were her friends and her family. She, there was a connection made. And for her to have to move away from that, people don't sometimes realize what you're giving up.
Right.
When you do make that shift. And I'm telling you, to the point that this lady, she never retired. Probably 6 months ago, I got a phone call. At her desk, she had a stroke. She just refused to leave. And we thought, she knew she had health issues, but it's so important to sometimes, because that is your life. That's your community. When we say it's your life, it's not just your life, but it's your community, it's your family, it's the people you conversate with, it's what you look forward to getting up doing every day. And when you don't have it, I think you have to allow yourself time to process it. I believe it's got to be a little easier if you're planning and you're preparing for it. At like 65, I'm out of here. I hear that from so many women. They'll say, "Oh my gosh, at 65, I am done." And then to have to think that we may be moving into a future where you may be working longer than you really want to or expected that you would, but just to allow yourself that space. And I think a lot of times on both sides, the people that are celebrating you, they want to celebrate because they see that as an achievement for you as well. And maybe sometimes we're not ready to honor that achievement. It's not quite the achievement that we want. So
for sure. I totally relate to that. I'm 73. People ask me, "Are you going to retire?" No, I'm going to continue to see clients until I no longer recognize them when they come in the door.
Yeah.
So how about you, Jen? Talk about career grief.
Well, my situation's different because I started my career later in life. When I started having children, my husband and I owned our own company. So anything I did was always for our company, but mostly I was raising the kids and doing all the volunteer work that went with that. So I was raising kids for 15, 20 years. So I started my career going into age 50, and I feel like I'm just getting started, to tell you the truth. So I have yet to experience the grief that you are all referencing. I've observed it in others, and I completely understand it as I observe it in others, but I can't say I've experienced it myself because I'm coming at it from a very different angle. And I don't ever see myself not working. I see myself determining, because of the way I've designed my business and career. I did it very purposefully because I wanted to live a certain way in the next, several decades. But yeah, I'll be working for a very long time. But it's going to change form over and over. And that's, I think, an acceptance that needs to happen.
Yeah, when you have that kind of, so your career changes and evolves and changes and evolves. So it's the evolution, like Davetta said, when if you work somewhere 25 years, you've evolved and evolved and evolved, and now you're like tired and ready to leave. But when something gets snatched away from you right in the middle of you still loving it, that's hard. Yeah. So how about you, Karen?
Well, first, Davetta, I want to say that what I see in you is that you didn't lose your voice in your choice. You said you noticed how you felt about the retirement party. You didn't feel like partying about a retirement that you didn't expect. And you're like, no, thank you. No, I have a voice and I have a choice. And in this, and then, and then with that, I see you able to go into your next phase with power and agency that you didn't kind of leave behind. You didn't leave your power and your agency, your choice and your voice because you didn't have that position or career anymore. You brought it with you. And I think that's really cool. And I'm really excited about the, the passion that you have. For me, I mentioned it. It wasn't a long career, but it was 5 years of working for a breast cancer foundation after I had gone through breast cancer for 2 years. And it was a wonderful job. I worked for a wonderful woman. She was a mentor to me. She was a friend. We had a great, fun, exciting working relationship, and it was just she and I in this nonprofit, and we built up a lot of volunteers that came to help us. But with nonprofits come boards of directors, and with boards of directors come people, and with people and change often come, I'll just say it, evil people with evil plans that want to blow up something instead of come in and rise it up. And that's what happened after 5 years. And I was absolutely devastated. I mean, I cried and I cried, and I'm just like, how can I not, and I'm like, who's going to help the women? And what I recognized is that and my boss she'll say the same thing, that we were holding on to something so tightly that we couldn't, that there was no room for the potential of what's next, because we just, we were holding on. But it was a lesson in that, that God does have a plan and a purpose and a season, and he does work all things together for good. And never would I have thought that my mom's horrendous cancer, would be what had me leave that. Well, that wasn't why I left, but it was part of it. It was becoming very toxic there. It's really why I left. But it kind of gave me this to move into the what? Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to leave this job. Well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take care of my mom. So I did that for 4 months. And then what opened up was this, career and passion and work in ministry that I have now, that came from letting go of that thing. But it's true, my identity and my structure and all of that was so tied up in all of that. And I don't think that society and the workplace give women enough recognition in that it's hard. Like for men, it's hard for men to retire because, their identity's in it and da-da-da. Well, it's hard for us too. And we doesn't mean we're going to just float into something. We have passions and purpose that we want to, keep moving forward with. And I think the message is we can. Retirement doesn't, or a job loss or a job change that you weren't expecting, that it's not the end of the story. There's grief to it for sure. It is a loss, and we can grieve fully through that, so we can live fully into our next passion or career.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for just this wonderful brain trust here and hearing these wonderful minds working. So at the end of my videos, I always ask you for your 1-minute wisdom. Like if everybody ignored everything we did the whole time and you could just get them to carry away the most important nugget, what would you want people to know about women and grief and the things women need to grieve and don't? What would you like us to know? What's your 1-minute wisdom? So Jen, would you like to start?
1 minute. I would say that grief is a part of being human and the human experience. And my wish for everyone is that they get to feel fully human and live a full life. And that means you're feeling the spectrum of emotions that come with being human. And so on one end of that, sometimes there is grief, there is sadness, there is a malaise, there are those things. But on the other end, what those make possible in the contrast is something so beautiful and vibrant and true. And every human being deserves to feel that. And I think when we blunt it or numb it or run from it, we're missing out on that full spectrum experience of being human. And everyone deserves to experience that.
Oh, it's cool.
Okay, Davetta.
I think I definitely would like for women to know that grief is a part of life, and we experience it on so many different levels and in so many different ways. But it's not realistic to think that we're going to go through life and not experience grief in some form. And your grief does not have to look like anyone else's at all. It's yours, but not to experience it, not to allow yourself to experience it is just prolonging it, because it is going to happen. You are going to experience it at some point in time. So I think we actually, by allowing ourselves the space and that permission, we can determine how we want it to look, how we want it to look like, or how we need it to look like for us. And that's okay. Don't expect it to look the same for you as it looks for anybody else. But however it looks and it serves you, that's exactly what it's supposed to look like.
Great. Thank you. And Karen, what is your 1-minute wisdom?
Oh, I wrote it down because I'm a very wordy person. So I wanted to make sure it was a minute. I want women to know that they can reclaim the self that they denied in order to survive. You can reclaim that self that you denied in order to survive. And for me, it's doing it through embodied practices of awareness, compassion, choice, and so that you can regain your power, your voice, and your freedom to live fully. No longer surviving, but truly living. We can break free from toxic strength, and a toxic strength, I think, can be a generational, a cultural. Culturally, women, we've been told to stay strong by pushing down our own needs. But true courage is found in allowing ourselves to feel, to grieve fully, and then choose what supports our healing. And see if this resonates with any of you that have pushed through or made it through some grief. And that is, I was strong, I survived, but now I want to live again. So I can choose courage to feel what I feel, honor my needs, and make choices that give me life.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, so I'm gonna turn off the recording, and thank you once again for honoring me with your agreement to participate.
Thank you, Barbara.